Hey, I'm Christina Rea, and welcome to Breaking Out of Breaking In, a practical filmmaking podcast about taking your creative career into your own hands and making great work get seen without playing the Hollywood game.
Or at least while changing the rules. Hi, I'm Brie Castellini, your other co-host, and today we're breaking down the craft of proofs of concepts with filmmaker and friend Meghan Ross. But before we dive in, we do want to plug that we have a monthly newsletter. It's not really new anymore, but we do have it, and it is free. And you can sign up for it at the bottom of breakingoutpod.com. Definitely hop on. We've always got some cool stuff in there, including monthly creative inspiration prompts. But enough about that. Welcome, Meghan.
Thank you. Thank you, Brie. Thank you, Christina. Thank you for having me. Also, a good reminder, I didn't know you had a newsletter. Now I'm going to subscribe because I follow you all in all the other places.
So you got to get the trifecta, the Instagram, Twitter, and newsletter.
Yeah.
Otherwise, are you a real fan? Not yet.
Nope.
Well, you're not a booby. You're not an official
I'm not a booby.
Yes.
I want to be embraced by the boobies.
Well, this is a good first step. So how about you introduce yourself? Who are you and what do you make?
Yes. Who am I? Oh, still wondering that in my 30s. My name is Meghan Ross. As mentioned, I'm a filmmaker, writer, director, producer, comedian, sometimes activist when I'm not burnt out, middle child, which explains a lot of the previous titles. I've basically tried every medium in comedy. So started in like sketch, improv, stand-up, humor essays, then finally got into sitcom writing, feature writing, abandoned that, and then focused again on late night stuff. When I moved to Austin, I started in New York, moved to Austin, and got into film here. Because I was like, I have all this stage show stuff. And, we would film the late night show, but it like live production is rough. And we always try to improve it, but it's rough.
Yeah. It's a whole other animal.
Yeah. I'm like, I have some humor essays. I have some like written stuff. And then I have some scripts that'll never see the light of day. Like I need to have something I can actually freaking show. That's like, this is my tone. This is the work I'm trying to go for. So I made my first short in 2018. Only wanted to be a writer producer, asked my friend to direct it. Maggie Berger, shout out. And she was like, nope, you're directing. Thus, I became a director and I love it even more than producing. But so now I'm mostly doing, I would say, a mix of like comedy shorts, sometimes dark comedy, and then half-hour sitcoms is like the space I'm trying to play in. So trying to position myself as a TV writer / director, knowing that the director piece is a lot more ambiguous in how to pursue that. And I know you guys did an episode about that, like TV directing. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Very cool. And you're still based in Austin or you started your career in New York, but you're from Jersey. Did you go to film school? What was your school? Oh, you were born in New York. I guess I didn't know that. You have such a Jersey energy.
So my parents had my older siblings in New York, lived in New York, all over. Thank God they moved because I could have been like a Staten Island baby with like a really obnoxious accent. Moved to the Jersey suburbs for me. I'm the third of four. And then my mom didn't want to change her doctor. So like they commuted into the city to have me. So I have a New York birth certificate, which I had to order online in order to renew my license in Texas, because it's easier to get a gun than to get my fucking license. But I grew up in Jersey. So I was like, grew up in Jersey, went to school, Boston University, studied business. So got my BS in BSing. I never thought of myself as a creative because I was like the one nerdy, like the smart, like not even smart, but just like the hardworking student of the family. My other siblings were in like, my sisters were in like fashion and beauty. And so was my mom. My dad was in the food industry. My brother changed his major 100 times and eventually landed in film. And then I just always loved comedy. Consumed it like at a young age, just loved like all the old, TV land stuff, like weird stuff, like Strangers with Candy, sketchy stuff, like Kids in the Hall. But never thought I would be in that space. Like I was like, I'm going to be a lawyer. And then that was in high school. And then I was like, no, I'm going to fall into business because my mom's like, study business, that can apply to a lot of things and you're good at math. So I really did not know exactly what I wanted to do, but I just knew that I had to be it just felt like I had the expectation to like go on and climb the corporate ladder.
Sure.
Shout out to my parents for, well, mostly my mom for like instilling that, but they gave me my work ethic. So that applies to the film side. Then when I was in college, I started doing some comedy stuff, like basically, and this translated to my day job where like in college, I hated my major so much. Like I just was not excited by my classes. I minored in advertising so that I can get some stuff from the comm school. And then they added a TV and film minor, but wouldn't allow me to switch because they're like, I was a sophomore, maybe a junior, and they're like, you don't have time to do it. And I'm like, I will literally take classes in the summer. Like I want to, like they just didn't allow it. So I was like, cool, I will just get that experience outside. I studied abroad, and I think that was my first like film related internship. I interned at Universal Pictures International Office. So in my mind, I was like, okay, this is how I'm going to get close to TV and film. I'll be in the marketing department, you know? And so I got to work on marketing campaigns for Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and Kick-Ass and the OG Despicable Me. Have not seen a single Despicable Me, but did an international marketing deck for them. And then came back home. And that summer I was like trying to get an internship at NBC because this is like the heyday of the Thursday night comedy lineup. Like basically what I didn't realize at the time is that like The Office made me want to be a TV writer. I was just like, so, and I got into it because I thought it was a TV version of Office Space. And so like, I wasn't even like a genuine like UK fan or anything, but I consumed both versions. I memorized the deleted scenes of season 1 and 2 DVD. Like I was a freak, like going from high school to college. And so I would just like try to fill my extracurriculars and my internships with that like TV and film education. So I interviewed at Bravo. This is also the heyday of Bravo, like Real Housewives building up. Andy Cohen went to BU in the comm school. So I was like, yeah, like I'm going to work in The Office. I'm going to, you know, work on these cool, weird shows that are scripted, but not scripted. And I think the reason I didn't get the internship at Bravo, or at least I don't know what happened, is like, that was the one time I forgot to send a thank you email. And so it's kind of, but I'm glad that it didn't work out that way, because the next best thing was that I got an internship at TV Without Pity, which was owned by Bravo, which meant that, so it was in the 30 Rock building, but they were, you know, an independent website. It was for those listening out there, TV Without, I forgot what the fans were called, but basically this is like an old school, one of the first, I think, websites that would recap shows. So they did like Survivor and Dawson's Creek. And then they expanded into film, and I got this internship. I remember it was like, I knew I was in the right place because I was able to like say the phrase vampire porn in my interview, because we were talking about True Blood, and I'm dating myself. But so the bonus of me getting that job, not only did it like propel my comedy writing style, because it was very, you know, snarky, like I basically digested the TV news. That was like, Twitter was becoming a thing, so I had like all these lists where I just follow all of the TV news and film news and journalists, and then I would recap the news every day in a snarky manner. And the best part is that we got to review Bravo shows, and we could talk shit about them because we were a separate entity. So like, even though Bravo owned us,
the perfect system.
Yes, the perfect system. And so once I graduated, I thought I'd be able to go back to TV Without Pity. It was a very small team, like 4 or 5 of us. But unfortunately, based like on the timing and someone else coming into the role, like there wasn't a spot for me. So the only other job I had was as a media buyer, like job offer. And so that was basically being a middleman between the TV networks and the clients. So I was buying TV commercials, negotiating TV commercials. And I was miserable because it was like the business side of advertising. And although it was like a weird time, because like I got to go to the upfronts, which like what 22-year-old in like a disgustingly designed Forever 21 dress gets to go to the upfronts, like, yeah, and be like mingling with like Mindy Count, not really mingling, just like breathing the same air. But so I was miserable. I started sketch classes then at UCB. I knew I was like just a super fan of all these things. I didn't really know where I would end up in the comedy space. I think I still was like, I'll work on the business side. Like, I want to work for, at the time, IFC was building up their comedy lineup. So I was like, I want to, I didn't get a job at NBC, but yeah, so I started taking classes at UCB, as one does when they're miserable, and doesn't realize that like that will also later on be a source of misery, but for different reasons. But it was really a changing point for me. I do have to credit the theater for that, because it finally pushed me towards like, oh, I am a creator. Because from sketch, I took improv to like help with my sketch writing skills. And then my boss at my day job, my first day job, was like, hey, you're miserable. You should go talk to the other networks that we have relationships with and see if there's a job on the network side. And that's how I ended up at Sundance TV. So like, to answer your question, no, I didn't go to film school.
But that's a valuable story, because I think one of the things that we really want this podcast to do is show people how many different ways breaking in looks. And a lot of the times, even people who we would consider having broken in aren't. I guess also just for like transparency purposes, the way we know Meghan is because she is a fellow Seed and Spark person. She sort of took over Christina's job when Christina left. Meghan is like the head of creative success
title
now.
Of Christina's job. Like I
exactly.
Yeah.
You absorbed Christina's job and someone else's job and somebody else's job, but that's your day job currently, right? That's your only day job currently?
Yes, it's my only means of income.
Relatable, and moving on. So I want to come back to Sundance for future reasons, but obviously we are here ostensibly to talk about proofs of concept and sort of the craft of them, the strategy of them. So really briefly, before we get into the details, can you tell us what your proof of concept is? Logline, what it's a proof of concept of?
Yes. So unrelated to my day job at Sundance TV, because I got nothing out of that. 2020 is when I got back into screenwriting, pandemic hit, blah, blah, blah. But so Sundance, I got into the Sundance Episodic Lab and in 2021, and I developed this new script idea. So that it's Here to Make Friends. So an anxious, aging millennial, Arab American, Austin transplant goes on a mission to find the platonic love of her life when she realizes she's never had one lasting female friend, but she must learn to befriend herself first. So this is actually an idea that started as a web series in 2018. And so the evolution of this started as a web series, applied to a different fellowship with it, didn't get anywhere with it, put it away. And then I thought, because it's such a simple concept, it's a friendship rom-com, essentially, I didn't think I was ready to write it during the time that I started writing. Like, I applied to the Sundance Episodic Lab with another script, like a finished script. And then they told me in the final interview, oh, that like, you don't have to work on the script you apply with, you can bring any idea. So I pitched Here to Make Friends because I was lucky that at the moment I was in a writer's group, and after the first comedy pilot I wrote in that group that did decent, like in the script competition space, I was trying to outline my next one, and it was going to be a half-hour animated comedy, taking a feature that I had written years ago and turning it into TV show. And I was not breaking the story. Like, it was not working. I kept bringing in my beat sheet, and I don't even know if I got to outline phase, but I was not breaking the story. And I basically like had this realization, like after like a tough writers group feedback session, I was like, okay, I'm moving on to the next thing. Like, it was clear, like, this isn't the thing I was meant to write, because at the same time I was trying to break that story, I was getting so excited about this Here to Make Friends idea, and like building up an iPhone note list and a Google Doc of research and like ordering books and all that, like getting really in the weeds on it. But in my mind, I was like, Here to Make Friends is going to be, my flea bag, in that it's going to be a simple concept, but I have to be a way more polished writer before I can write something so simple, because simple has to be excellent. And that's why I didn't write Here to Make Friends immediately. And so it wasn't until like I was forced sort of by my writers group, making me realize like, that's not working. Go write the thing you want to work. So luckily the timing of that and me being in like beat sheet phase by the time I had that Sundance interview was just like kismet, because that was the idea they picked. So I developed it. I wrote it like basically starting from beat sheet. It's funny because I thought I had the story fleshed out, and then they were like, "You're like, we're rebreaking this." Like I thought I was like farther along in the process, but it was good that I had a project so raw, because some of the members of the lab were brought in like scripts they'd been working on for years, like fully fleshed, and that must have been a lot harder to let go of like characters they've lived with for so long. So like I wasn't married to my project yet. So it was good for me. It was Play-Doh. Like it was good for me to like break things apart, think about things differently, and basically bring in it was a version 2 that got brought to the lab, but because of my writers group schedule, it was a V4. But really it was like, so it's like I've only written 4 drafts of the script, gets brought to the lab. So these showrunners read it and then you get feedback. And that was in November 2021. And then we come back from the lab and it's expected like, hey, you gotta like polish this script. We have a pitch parlor. It was going to be in March, got pushed to May 2022, and like have it be in good shape. And I was so scared to like go back to the script, but I knew that I had to polish the script and get it in good shape, because also like I needed to take advantage of that opportunity with the pitch parlor. And 2, I knew I wanted to shoot a short film version. Actually, early in 2022, I was still expecting to do a web series version. So I knew that I wanted to shoot this even before it was pitched as a pilot. I was like, this is my like Austin project. Like this is the most me project. I know I want to make this a web series. I hadn't successfully made a web series. Like my very first attempt was in like 2012 with like in New York. Like it was like we made 1 episode and it was a 2-person crew. So
relatable. We've all been there.
So I was like, you know, I always loved web series. I used to nerd out about how like Portlandia started from Thunder Ant and Children's Hospital. Like I just like was like, this is the trajectory I need to put myself on. But then I was like, well, web series, 1, I have less experience in producing web series and writing web series. And 2, it could be, it seems based on what my vision was, it'd be more expensive. So why don't I give myself, you know, the somewhat easier way out and turn it into a proof of concept short film? And what also solidified that decision is that after we got back from the lab, we're polishing our pitches for the pitch parlor, which I jumped into that because I was like, oh, something short form? Yes. Yeah. And like abandoned my script. So I was discovering plot beats while developing my pitch that I hadn't even introduced in my pilot. Like, and then like when I got back into the pilot, I was like, oh, this is how I'll, you know, so it was a backwards way of working. But you know, my own methods of procrastination. So Sundance told us that they have some for the fellows, you can apply to get a little bit of grant money from the sponsors, and it could go toward you just having extra money to like focus on your script, finish it up, like finishing funds, but for your script. Mm-hmm. You can use it for travel, like if you're out of state and you want to take flights to LA for meetings. And then another category was a proof of concept. And they showed a couple examples, and one was Smilf. And I'd never seen Smilf the series, but I knew that it, you know, had its success in its moment in time. And so they showed the short that played at Sundance, and it was super simple. Like it was 1 scene, 1 location, 2 characters. And I was like, oh, like this could be like this is a tonal comp for the pilot. And what I learned is that I forget the name of the creator, but basically she had the pilot written already. She submitted this proof of concept short to the film festival circuit. It played at Sundance. And then from my understanding, like people were like, this is great. Like we want to make it a TV show. And she was like, I already have the pilot script. And I think it went to FX. Maybe there was a bidding war. I don't know all the history. All I know is that it like set herself up to be able to sell that show as a series more easily. And also was like, because she was, I think, like a newbie to the scene relatively. I don't know if she had TV credits before that. Maybe she did, but it was her first like show she created. It like put her front and center in front of like people who could make decisions about what gets put on TV. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'm doing a short. Like that was the evolution of that.
So it started as a web series concept put aside, became a half-hour comedy short when Sundance asked you to pitch them a different thing than what they were originally interested in for the Episodic Lab. And then it became a short again once you had developed it as a half-hour comedy project so that you could theoretically have an easier time pitching it eventually. Is that the timeline we're looking at here?
Yeah. Well, what's funny is, and the web series idea. So Macro, it was their first, I think it was called like a macro episodic, like it was some macro episodic competition. It was 2018, the first time they were doing it. And it was, I think specific to digital and web series, if I'm understanding correctly. Maybe there was long, like half hours too, but I was like, ooh, I could like, I only have to do like a pitch doc. Cool. I didn't have the script written, but it was for people of color. And this was the first time I was applying to something that was for people of color, because I check off Caucasian on all forms because I'm Syrian. Like I'm Syrian on both and all sides, but we're categorized on the census as Caucasian. But I'm also Indonesian, like my dad's first generation Indonesian. But because I didn't grow up with that side of the family, I didn't feel like I could claim that side. Like I've never checked off Asian. Even though like we technically are. So like, I remember I was at the Seattle airport. I was coming back from a wedding and finishing this like on the deadline. And I was Googling like, I literally was like, is Syrian BIPOC? Is Syrian, or maybe it's POC back then. I was like, where is Syria? Like in terms of, like I just did not, in my application, if I went back and read it, and it's me literally having a meltdown, being like, I'm not sure if I could apply to this or not. And like referencing Aladdin. And so
totally.
that
I've been there. Very relatable.
Yeah, that became a theme in my present day pilot, because the main character, while it's not about her being an Arab woman, like it is very much like, Austin is in Texas, a blue state and a blue city and a red state. It's like, and it's like changing so much, it doesn't know its identity anymore a little bit. This character is also like, what am I? Like, I can't play the Muslim card because I was raised Catholic, but I am very Middle Eastern, but also like she doesn't, the line I always use is like, she's too brown for the white kids, too white for the brown kids. So like that unknowingly seeped into my, the underlying themes of my pilot, just from that first experience of thinking like, can I even apply to this? So yeah, web series idea. At one point I wanted to pitch it to Bumble BFF to like make it like a
branded series,
like SpawnCon. Thank God they ignored me aggressively. They're based in Austin and they've ignored me hardcore. So that's why I have like a made up friendship app in my short. But so yeah, web series. Then I was like, this is a half-hour comedy. And then from half-hour comedy, short film proof of concept that can live as a standalone.
What's the runtime of that version?
Right now we're at 11 minutes. We're still in post. So I'm thinking it'll be like 10 and a half to 11. Like I was like, my last short was 13 and I was cut down from like 25 or 20 at one point. So yeah, I'm like, I understood like how the expectations of like, try to keep it under a certain amount for film festival programming. So that's where we're at. We're right in the middle of post right now.
So definitely want to like get into the details of shortening the full-length pilot into a short. But really quickly, I do want to talk about Sundance, the Episodic Lab that you were in, because obviously it's one of the coveted labs and fellowships out there. And I imagine some people are surprised to hear that like you got into a script writing like lab opportunity, you had this opportunity to pitch, and yet you're still doing the indie film grind, possibly gearing up for crowdfunding for finishing. So like, it's not the be all end all that I think a lot of people expect. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience like in the lab? Anything you learned from having to switch your pitch midway through interviews and your kind of takeaways from that?
Yeah, I know people are so sick of hearing the term imposter syndrome, but like, I've been doing comedy 10 years at that point, and I was so comfortable with the rejections and hearing no from things that I thought I was a good fit for. My DP of my first short, Hui Bing Law, shout out to him. He sent me the Sundance Episodic Lab application when we were like in post. And so this is like 2018, maybe 2019. And I was like, thanks, but no thanks, because I wasn't ready. I didn't have a script I was proud of. I wasn't like, did not have the level of skill that like I'd be embarrassed. And I knew the rejection would come. Like I was like, I'm not ready. And then so when 2020 hit, that's when I focused on half hour writing, like halted all the other forms of comedy I was doing. I basically was like, okay, like I had a sort of I call it like between a midlife and quarter life crisis, because I genuinely like I did my show for 5 years, and I thought that was going to lead to something, my late night show. There was all these opportunities that I thought would turn into things, but that never did. Mm-hmm. The fact that I got into the lab by myself, not by myself, because I credit Spencer, my partner, who like metaphorically got me off my ass in terms of like us co-writing that first script together. And then I took it and ran when he had to focus on the startup, and my writers group. Like, so it's like, I didn't get it on my own, but like I credit them, but I didn't get it through any of the connections I thought would, like Sundance TV, like people from my day jobs that I thought would like take me under their wing. So it was a real shock to the system, but I knew I like poured my heart into that application. Also, I had like, when I was focused on the late night space, like I would find out late night packet information, like, and they usually don't even give you enough lead time, but like, because I didn't have a manager, so it would trickle down to me, and then they'd be like 48 hours to submit a packet to like the break with Michelle Wolf. And so I wasn't used to having that time to really like pour myself into an application. And this one I did. Like I really like I think it was like at the time first 5 or 10 pages, and then the answers, I was just like, this is me. I know this, like I'm really like putting myself in this application, like as a writer, and I don't feel like phony about it. Like it was just, I was like, it'll hurt if I don't, but if I get in second round, that's like, that'd be awesome. That's all I wanted, like get to second round. The funny thing is that when I found out I got in, it was 420. There was a glitch in the system, so everyone got rejected. And then I found out, I got accepted. And there was 2 other good news that I had that day. And I was like scared, because I'm not used to good news. I'm not used to 1 good news in a year, let alone like 3 in 24 hours. So I was like, this is fucked. Like everything is fucked. I'm scared. Pandemic turned everything upside down. And then I got the interview, and then, so I had to pitch. The experience of pitching in the interview, I think I was, because I had a little bit of experience pitching, like I did the AFF pitch competition, and I, like being in a writer's group, like learning how to submit pitches and get feedback. Like I didn't feel as nervous. And also I think my improv background of just being like, like, let me sell like this idea. Like I'm, clearly have like a million things going on in my head at once. So yes, let me pivot to that one. And I was actually like, I think it was a testament to how excited I was about the project and how much I wanted it. Because if I was pitching if like they happened to have the final interview a month before, and I was pitching that like half hour dog celebrity influencer animated comedy that like I think Fox ended up like putting out like an hour after I gave up on that script. And I think they would have been like, what was that? But like, because I was so jazzed, like every time I talked about this idea, I think that was and it's a relatable concept, making friends in your adult years, and especially during the pandemic. Like, so basically the first half of the lab was virtual. Most people were in LA. I was in Austin. There was one writer in between Chicago and New York, and then a second writer in New York, but then moved to LA. So it was nice representing the whole state of Texas. And we basically started from scratch. Like it was like the first deliverable was like, send us pretty much everything you've got. Like some people had scripts, some people just had pitches or beat sheets. So I sent them like, I had like fleshed out like a little bit of a version of a series Bible, because I had fleshed out some season arcs too. And then so basically it'd be like, you submit one deliverable, you get feedback, you have a feedback session with them, and then you move on to the next deliverable, and you're just revising on each deliverable instead of like bringing in multiple beat sheets the way like my writers group might do that, where it's like, we're not going to like tell you you're ready to move on until we feel like you're ready. Usually usually there's like a consensus of like, you're ready to go to pages. But with this, it was like, okay, considerations, and then the next deliverable, beat sheet. Then it was beat sheet, then treatment / outline. So it's like the things are getting longer. Some people are re-breaking as you go. You're having these Zoom feedback sessions and brainstorming with just the Sundance team. So it's like Lexi, the coordinator, is manager, Jandis, the director, the dream team. They're amazing. And so they like really helped shape your story, because you're not with the fellows yet. Like everyone's getting their individual feedback. And then you bring in, I think it was the beginning of October, one draft. Or for some people, like they were on like their 15th draft or whatever. And then the locked draft that you're going to bring to the lab. And I was glad, because I was like, I do not feel polished as a TV writer. I like switched mediums so many times. So I worked in an extra set of deadlines with my writers group. So like it was from August to mid-October, I was just like churning out deliverables weekly, either to Sundance or my writers group. And it was a little chaotic, but like it was the only way I could do it in terms of like feeling as prepared as I could be with a new idea. Like it was really like crunch time on a new idea versus like my last script where I had like 6 months to a year to like really like fuck around with it. We get to the lab. We're very lucky that we get to go in person for the first time in a while, because then like December hit and it was chaos again, and the festival and the director's lab went on Zoom again, or virtually. So we get there and it's like magical. I don't even know if I've been like on a mountain, but it was just incredible, beautiful sights. The best part about it, and I remember I brought this up in my final interview, is that when I worked at Sundance TV, I won't get into the many challenges of that experience, but one challenge was that the year I was supposed to go to the Sundance Film Festival as a marketing coordinator, they made me stay behind. And so I was alone in the New York office. And then we didn't have a social person at the time. So they would send me pictures from all the fun parties and red carpet. And I would at nights and on weekends in between like improv shows, I would have to pretend I was at Sundance and post them.
Oh my God.
To make matters worse. And so I'm like, karma, like when I finally got to go, like I wasn't in Park City and it wasn't the festival, but we were at the resort and for free, which was, bonus. Yeah. So I felt very lucky to have that experience. The first few days, so you basically get 3 showrunner mentors, and also edit this if I have long-winded answers, but you get 3 showrunner mentors, and each showrunner mentor I think gets 2 pilots, like 2 creator. Everyone was an individual writer, and then there was 1 creator team or writing partners. And then basically it's a mix of workshops where you're like kind of like absorbing stuff from the showrunner mentors. Then we had a reboot exercise where we tried to reboot, and I say try, but it was actually fun. Like I was like surprised we took Frasier and turned it into like a 2022 version. Because also I'd never seen Frasier, so we watched the last episode, and then we were split into 2 rooms, and there were like showrunners of those rooms that led the rooms, and so we like broke. We did blue sky, that like blue sky exercise, which is like basically starting from like very broad place and then like coming up with characters. And I'd never worked in a writer's room, so this was my first experience seeing what the processes were like. I want to say there was like 1 to 2 people with like staff writer experience, and mostly, and then the writing partners had writer's assistants experience. So the majority of the group did not have writer's room experience, but everyone was phenomenal. It was like a sort of like natural chemistry between all of us. And even though all of us are different genres. And then the last day or two with the showrunners, we do writers' rooms for each pilot. So they split us up even more. So I was assigned 2 different comedy rooms, which was fun because I got to pitch on someone else's idea. And so there was I want to say 2 to 3 writers in each room, and then 2 to 3 showrunners helping out.
Did the showrunners read the scripts before the lab?
Yes. I believe, I think the showrunners that you were assigned were only required to read the scripts of the people they were assigned. And then if they were interested, if they heard the log line, some people did pick up other scripts along the way during the week, which is cool because I was watching my pile go down. I was people were probably throwing them out, but I was someone more people read my script and tell me it's bad. But I was the one project that actually didn't get a writer's room, and I was kind of glad because one thing we didn't realize when we were going into the lab, we all thought that we were going to be rewriting our scripts on the fly. And it wasn't that way at all. We were really just doing exercises, beating out story, re-breaking story. There was no one was opening up final draft or writer duet, no pages, which is good because I thought we would be restructuring our scripts entirely. They used to do the pitch during the lab, in previous years. So you would be have these first few days of completely flipping your project on its head. And then the industry mentors would come on the last day or two. And then you would be pitching to them on an idea that you weren't didn't have your feet steady on yet. So we were really grateful they took the pitch parlor element. That was a new thing they did this year because then we knew our shows by then, but we were still figuring out our shows. So my session was after the lab, I got a session with an industry mentor that was a feedback session or a rewrite session where you learn how to take feedback and do a rewrite. So I enjoyed that while separate from the lab because I was I'm getting so much feedback from my showrunner mentors that I felt I was going to be in my head if I did have a writer's room during the lab even more. And than I was coming out of it, not in a bad way. It's just when you're getting so many opinions that you hadn't heard before, I knew the opinions of my writers group, and I knew the opinions of the Sundance team, but these are people who had never read my work before, weighing in with very different comedy experiences. And so it was a lot to take in. So you really have to give yourself time after the lab because I thought I was going to jump right into the rewrite. I was yeah, I'm going to have a polished script by the end of the year. And I think one of the generals I was on there, that's not how people do it, in the lab. So then we came out of the lab and then it was kind of you're not on your own, but you operate independently and can request meetings with the Sundance team as needed. And some people were able to work with their industry. Oh, I forgot the last day and a half of the lab is industry mentors. So execs, I don't think there were reps. It was basically execs, production company, people from production company, streaming platforms. Yeah, buyers, essentially. I think there was one producer, and they give you insight on the business side of the industry. And they also give you feedback on their scripts. So you have 3 generals with them. Okay. And then you come out of the lab. Some people were able to keep in touch with their mentors. Some people aren't because, they're full-time working showrunners and TV writers and developing and, they're in the industry. I leaned on my writers group and the Sundance team, and I started to circulate it to a writer and comedy friends outside of that circle. And, as you know, I did that Zoom reading in the last weekend before I locked pages or for now, because I'm going to crack into it at some point again. So from January to what was going to be March, then got pushed out to May, we're we have deliverables for the pitch. And it was not a traditional pitch. It was, I called it like our writer's debutante, where like it was really us being introduced to the industry because they invited more people outside of like the people who were at the lab. And you had to do a deck. So it was like a visual element and a verbal pitch. But it was only 7 minutes. I think it was 7 minutes. So it's not like you couldn't go into like a lot of specifics. It was like broad strokes pilot, broad strokes season 1 character arcs. It wasn't like a pitch I would immediately take into a like pitch meeting with a stream. It was like elements of it.
And this was intended for feedback from the like industry people that had already seen bits of it and were new. Was like how were they billing this to you on as like participants? What did you expect to come out of it?
So the feedback, we only got feedback from like internally. So we'd have all these deadlines, just like the first part of the lab, like elements of the pitch, elements of the deck. And we did one session with execs, and that's where we got like industry feedback. And then we went on pause again for the pandemic when they pushed it out to May. So like after that feedback session, the first couple scheduled ones in the beginning of the year, you independently would schedule feedback sessions with the Sundance team. And they set it up as like really a writer's debutante in that it's like introducing you to the industry. So you're not getting feedback. There's no like questions after the pitch. It was so like different from a pitch competition. It was really like us presenting our ideas and then seeing if anyone in the audience was like, hey, I want to rep that writer, or hey, I'm interested in that. And the hope is that we're teasing out the script enough to get them to request to read it. And so to like lead to conversations. So that was really that purpose of the pitch, to like, it was like coming to the end of the year of the lab, and they were trying to set us up for the next step, which is, for some of us to get reps, for some of us to get staffed, for some of us to sell the script, for some of us, all three, so it was like whatever you needed next in your career, the pitch parlor was hoping to bring you to that stage. And then, the Sundance team still works with you even after like the official scheduled portion of the lab is done, which is really nice. It is like a full encompassing program. It's not like you took the workshop and now you're out of here.
Mm-hmm. Or they're trying to sell you new things to pay for to,
keep participating.
That happens a lot.
Oh my God. Well, yeah. So basically it's like they wherever we're at, they'll like keep thinking of us for stuff. We can keep checking in with them. So it's been fun because now I'm in this new like medium and like sharing it with them, because it's like I only worked with them on written stuff, and now I'm like, hey, like I want to like keep this going with this, and move it into a different medium and a different track until I feel like we can package this to sell and like solidify. Because going back to the Snuff example, since I am a nobody, I knew, Spencer and I talk about this all the time. It's like nobody buys scripts. It's like so rare, and like all the stars have to align. And a lot of those stars are like, you're somebody, or you have someone big attached. And so for me as someone who is currently unwrapped, but like in the courting phase, never been staffed and has never sold a script, like I have a lot working against me in this already unfair industry. So I'm trying to build up a case for it to be really hard for people to say no. That's where I'm at. Like, I'm used to the no, but I need to like at least like invest as much as I can into pushing this over my version of the finish line. And while still like seeking, staffing opportunities. But yeah, I was like, it's happened before. I'm not saying it will definitely happen for me, but it was also like, I wanted to also experience the film festival circuit after having only done it in the pandemic. So it's like hitting on a couple goals for me. Like I wanted to direct something again. Like I was like, this is the one project I would actually star in and direct, like there was like a couple goals that I hit on beyond just making a proof of concept of the pilot.
Totally. So when you're having these sort of like meetings, because I know you've had some meetings, you've had some that were like officially scheduled and some elsewhere, have people brought up that like it would be really helpful if you had a visual component? Like has the concept of a proof of concept come up in meetings that you've had?
I would say with some people who knew that I was a director and did both short films, because like the majority of the people in the lab are writers. And
Sure.
some are like writers slash comedians. There's one woman in the lab, Elizabeth Palmer. So she had a feature at Sundance Film Festival that she wrote, but she didn't direct, but like she had a strong influence on. So like she had contributed to like having like a long form piece made. And then there was another Gianna in the lab who is a filmmaker. So like there wasn't an expectation for anyone to turn it into a proof of concept. Like no one was pressuring anyone. Like some people were looking at it as like, this is a writing sample to get staff. And some people were like, I want to get this sold. And so the only people that were like really, not egging me on, but like would even mention like, oh, you should make that are people who already looked at my bio and knew that I'm positioning myself as a writer slash director. So it made more sense. Like, cause I think it would be tough for people coming out of the lab and it's like, you're already really focused on trying to get like staffing jobs or sell your script, like to add the element of like a first time short film. But like, I think I was the only crazy one that was like, I wanted to make this before it was a script. And so I think I was going to do it, even if it wasn't going to be a proof of concept. Yeah, strategic. But now I'm like really laser targeted at like making this like set me up for the next step of like packaging and pitching this.
Okay. So what were the starting points for you in terms of adapting a full-length story that theoretically could span seasons into not just a shorter piece, but a standalone shorter piece? For you, like what were the important elements of that adaptation process?
So I did it partially right and partially wrong the first time.
Okay.
So basically what happened is I locked the script in early or mid-April, and I was like finalizing my pitch. And as soon as I locked the script, I went right into pre-pro. Oh, I gave myself a half day to adapt the pilot into a short. So like I didn't really spend the time that I should have, because I like the shorts I've written have exclusively been shorts. Like and then I've adapted like other people's writings, like humor essays, into shorts. So it was more like visual interpretations, but I had not taken a long form piece to turn it into a short form script and then into a visual piece. And so I rushed myself. I knew there was 2 scenes I knew had to be in it. The friendship breakup scene and this set piece that I was like obsessed with this scene because I thought it was like, it would be so silly to see like actually shot. And then I was like, and I'll figure out what to do in the middle. And so I wrote a couple transitional scenes. The friendship breakup in the pilot is at a Boy Genius concert at Mohawk, which is a venue in Austin. So I was like, can't afford that. Like I knew right away I had to adapt that to be more producible. So when I adapted that scene to a more producible scene, I didn't think about the elements that weren't translating between that environment and what became like a brunch environment. Mm-hmm. So there were certain things and behaviors and like character interactions that weren't landing. And I didn't see this until someone called that out, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But basically like I was like, okay, I made this scene producible. I have my transitional scenes, and then I have my like set piece that I like really love. And then the ending, I don't even remember what the original ending for the short was, but it wasn't tying up loose ends. But I wasn't concerned about that because I was like, I'm going to take Bree's budget template and I'm breaking down my script. And I was like, so excited to get back into pre-pro and not think about story. And I did it wrong. And I got lucky. A woman who I'm talking to now, getting feedback from, who's like one of the only like Arab woman managers in the industry. Coincidentally, like we got connected a few weeks, I think, before I got into pre-pro. And so I think I had sent her the short script, and she noticed like some issues with the adaptation in terms of like, this is a short form piece, and where you would have had more time in a pilot to develop this character and showcase this character. Now you like took these scenes and like bookended them, and you didn't, she didn't say this like this, but basically I didn't think about what I needed to put into this short in order for a different audience to understand who this character is and not like just hate her guts. Like, I didn't think about the fact that like I'm smushing character development into a third of the pilot now.
Sure.
And like, it's a proof of concept. So like, I need to set this up as like, for people to understand that what I'm going for in the long form piece.
People have to like the character at the end if they want to see more of her.
Yeah, I have to set up the engine, and I have to work on the story engine in the pilot still. But anyway, so we were going to work on getting feedback on the pilot to like see how we work together and as a potential manager client. And then she like talked to someone else who was at the pitch parlor, Shuyu, who's wonderful. She's an exec, and they're friends. And like, basically they like Lubna, who's the manager, was like, oh, like, am I able to like talk about, like, give her feedback on the short? Or is this like stepping on, you know, I don't know. Like she wasn't sure if she should like intervene, because I was like going straight into pre-pro, and we were shooting in like a month. And I'm glad she intervened, because not only did it like improve the script tenfold, because it was like, keep in mind, no one read the short script except my brother, and I think like my producer, who are wonderful, but they're directors and producers. So they're like looking at it through a different lens and not necessarily like the story development lens. And so not only did it improve the script and like fix the problems that I was blind to, it removed a very complicated scene. And we were going to try to figure out a way to write ourselves out of that. And I didn't know how yet, while still maintaining like this other piece that we needed to basically like push the scene forward. And her pitch helped me like basically remove that element completely. And I was like, holy shit, like, not only did you make it easier for me as a producer, but you improved my writing, because she pushed me to like explore different options and different lines. Because I was like, I knew that there were things that weren't landing, but I was like already in pre-pro mode. Like it was past me, and I was like, I'll rework it or do a another like stage reading sort of thing. But so that experience made me realize, like, one, slow your roll. You can't just like take scenes from a pilot and turn that into a proof of concept. That's not how it works. And two, being able to like make sure my like voice comes through. Like this is a selling piece. Like, it is not just a short film. Like I wanted to work as a short film, but I also needed to work as like a tonal comp. Like basically like, hey, now we know what she's going for, and now we know what's in her head that maybe we weren't able to visualize from like just reading the script. So that was the process. Like your budget worksheets were just too tantalizing for me to resist. And I was like, my type A ass just wants to go right into pre-pro and ignore writing, give up on writing for like a month. And that was wrong. I think because my first short, I was in rewrites like throughout pre-pro, and I was like, I don't want to be there again. And
maybe overcorrected.
Yeah. And so this was helpful to have someone else's eyes on it, who could really, especially someone from like the business side, who could say like, hey, here's what you need to fix. Like, and then I was able to like, she had great pitches, and then I expanded on that. And I felt like a lot better at how it started and ended. And I was like, okay, this is a short now. This is a short film. I'm so glad she like intervened. Like, I'm glad like that her exec friend was like, no, like, you're working with her. You can bring up, because when she emailed me, she's like, you can tell me to fuck off, but like, if you're open to it, I'd love to do a notes call on the short. And I'm like, yes, please. Cause I'm, indecisive about everything. And like, yeah, like, I'm really glad I took that call. And like, for a couple of days, we were just like going back and forth on it. And I needed that. Like, you really like the feedback, external feedback, like you can't live in your little echo chamber. Like I did that for my late night show. I would never run things after I didn't have a writing partner on that. Like, it would just be me. And so like not having people to bounce ideas off of, I think is such a detriment to your career, and just does not help you at all in this industry. I'm not that good of a writer by myself.
I don't think anyone is.
No.
Even the Sorkins of the world.
It's also really hard to divorce yourself from what the version of it is that you are married to already and see it as, and then try and make it a short. I think like I've been programming short films for nearly a decade now, and that's the biggest mistake I see is people trying to do a proof of concept for a feature, especially, and they just make like a 15-minute version of their feature, and it's just like really crammed in and rushed, and there's no breathing room, and there's no real like there's just nothing left to want more of.
Yeah. Another driving factor to the way I executed on this is that my first couple shorts were really complicated production wise, like too many company moves, too many locations, too many wardrobe changes, too many extras and props. And I was like, so I was thinking about like, one, the COVID of it all, and two, simplifying it for myself so that I can really allow us to like light one long scene and allow the characters to play versus like bringing them in and out of so many different places, over a span of several days. So that was another driving factor. Like, I didn't want to cram. And I had actually worked with this DP on like day job stuff, but our DP, EJ Enriquez, he and I did a short together that his friend directed for her series, where I wrote a comedy sketch, and they like came in, it was a small crew, and seeing how like I can write something that does not have to be like this insanely high budget. Like, we were on my patio, it was me and my friend acting in it. There was like 2-3 props. We're in our clothes. There was a DP, a director, a PA who handled lighting, gaffing, like grip and sound. And like having that exercise before I went back to set was super helpful in knowing that, like, even though I did have to like crew up more than I thought I'd have to, but it like allowed me to not kill myself over too many like big, like, my first short was just like that. People thought it was a setup for a TV show or a web series because it was just so complicated, and really good shorts are simple. Like, when you go, like, once I started going to film festivals, I was like, oh, fuck. I was like, oh, this is how it should be. Like, 1 room, 2 people, like 2 rooms, 3 people. Like,
just like a snapshot.
So I'm learning, I didn't go to film school, so I'm still learning like these different mediums and how to improve and really nail that, the art of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's how a lot of us, I mean, I never technically went to film school either, and most of my education was on set. So to take a step back for people who obviously are not going to be familiar with your full-length pilot or the story of your short, what were by the end, like once you had a script that you were really happy with, what were the elements that you translated that you could give us advice on? Like, what are the things, if we're looking at our half hours or our hour-long samples, what are the things we should be looking at if we're looking to proof of concept our own concepts?
Well, know what, like, the style of what you're adapting, because like I was lucky that it's not a two-hander really. Like, it is very much like focused on one protagonist, and then there's supporting characters around her. And so I think it's important, because even though it's like you want it to be a standalone short, I think it's important to tease out some of the elements of the world of the show, even if you can't shoot it. So for example, like, she has a job, but I wasn't showing that part of her life in the short. So I incorporated into some on-screen graphics of like, because she's making like a potential friendship outreach list. And so she puts like her boss and her mentee on there and her dog. So like I worked in characters that you didn't see, but we're setting up like her long-term boyfriend. I just had him do like a VO, because I'm like, I don't want to add another, because like we're not giving him a scene. So it's like I slipped in these little elements of like the full series, because I knew I couldn't really write it in a way or in an affordable way that could give those
truly
people
include them.
The time that they would normally get in a half hour. So that was one thing I learned in the process, because like between the original script and the locked script of the short, like that was a new element where I was like, oh shit, now I have the time and space to like tease out these characters. I keep saying character development, but because my show is character driven, and I think that like you have to go based on like what kind of show do you have? Is it plot driven? Is it character driven? And then it's hard to do it. I think it's easier to do plot driven in a short because like, you know, like you get to tie it up at the end. I think it's harder to really be able to show like a life cycle of a character in a short. Most of them, I'm speaking broadly, but I think that's the challenge is like, what are the biggest takeaways of your pilot that you need to put in your short in order for an audience? And if you're, you know, trying to sell it, like potential buyers to know exactly what type of show this is. Cause that's a hard thing, like to watch a short film and be like, I can see this as a TV show, or to watch a short and be like, I can see this as a feature. I think that's not as easy as everyone thinks. So I think it's like, what are the most important elements of your show that make it like one unique to your style and your tone and your voice, and that has to shine in the short, because like there were certain jokes that weren't landing in the short, so like I was like, well, I want to make sure my voice is still in here, so I'm gonna like rework some of these lines in the dialogue, I'm gonna rework some of these character interactions, but I still can see this living in like a pilot version. Like, so you're kind of doing like you're thinking about it backwards, especially because I changed the friendship breakup scene significantly in the short version. And I'll probably go back now and rewrite that friendship breakup scene in the half-hour pilot. So I would say like allow yourself to, I'm like thinking of like separated on Facebook. Like, it's like, if you're not married, you're not divorced, but like you need to allow yourself, like you said, Christina, to separate yourself from the two mediums and play with like what changes you need to do. And as long as you're getting across like your voice as a writer, the characters, like, because like, you know, plot's obviously important, but why are we watching this show? Like what like if the plot is more important to the show, then the plot has to shine more than the characters in the short. And then I think it's just like also like know what your team's going to look like, because I knew that I needed to co-direct this with my brother, so that like I also had to put in a level of trust with him, because I wasn't watching playbacks or like in Video Village the way I normally would be, because I was on set or like in the scene. So I had to make sure that like, you know, as a writer / director that like
who's also acting,
like I was lucky that I had that prep time to work with not only my brother, but my DP and my producer, to make sure that like once I got to set, I could focus on the acting and they would be more concerned with the production aspects. Cause I've never directed and acted. Like that was very new to me. So I would make sure like, you know, if you're not directing, like you have someone that is going to work closely with you if it's going to be a proof of concept, because the writer does have to be involved in that sense if the writer's trying to sell their script.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually curious about your crew really quick, because something that I was running into when I was considering doing a proof of concept for a long form script that I have, something that I came up against is somebody mentioning like, I'm not super interested in working on a proof of concept just because like it doesn't feel like I would get as much out of that. And this is an actor / potential producer. They're like, if you're expecting to use this to like further your career, I get that and go for you. But it feels like that's a lot of effort for me, a person who isn't getting the same thing out of it. So like, I'm curious if that ever came up for you in conversations, when this is obviously very specifically a proof of concept for you personally and like your writing, not even necessarily for producing. Like, how did you talk about that with your crew?
Oh, like to be like, this is worth it for everyone, sort of.
Yeah. Like, yeah. What are they getting out of it? Or did that even come up? Because obviously having a standalone piece is, you know, valuable in its own right.
Yeah, it's interesting because like our casting director would also like not market, but like in her casting calls, she called it a proof of concept. And I would find myself calling it more of a short film because I'm like more familiar in the short film space. But like, and then my DP would be like when I was in the like, I just want this to do well in the festival circuit phase. My DP, EJ, the DP, would be like, so we want like, you know, we want to sell it. Like we want to make these like decisions where we're like really putting it all out there to have this be like at the level of quality where people will be like clearly we invested the time, the effort, the resources into making this more than just something to put through the festival circuit. Like this is meant, like we want this to go beyond, like we want it to be, essentially it's like we polished our pitches for the pitch parlor so that people could, it was a tease for people to request the scripts. And now this short film proof of concept is an even bigger tease for people to be like, oh, let me see the script and let me consider it for whatever. So yeah, I think most people were just like, hey, like this is a short film, who weren't close to me. And then the people close to me knew a little bit more of the details of like, I want to sell this into as a pilot. And like, you know, the team around me, like I'd say like our first AD or DP or my brother, my friend who was the producer, like we all also wanted this to be like a level up for us in our careers. Cause we're all, you know, have day jobs and, you know, my brother and Lauren, our producer, run their own production companies. So they get to, but they do client work. So it's like, sometimes they get to do fun narrative stuff, but like what pays the bills is client work. And then my other friends, it's like a mix of like freelance DPs and editors. And so it's like, we got like, oh, here's a thing that made me treat it differently than like any other indie project, was that I didn't do indie discounted rates. So it wasn't like what's in it for them. I was like, you're getting paid for your time as you would for a client. So like one example, my editor, I'm always like trying to see like how much I can get away with like favors versus like, it's like I'm friends with people I work with. So I'm like, I want to pay you well, but I know you're my friend. So you'll like do something for me cheaper. But when my friends who are now full-time freelancers in the industry have to decide between like a paid job and a discounted job, like I basically like didn't want to rush this. So I was like, okay, I'm going to pay for your actual time that you would be billing if this was like someone else, like a real like production. And it's a real production, but like someone with money. So I think it was a mix of like, people were like, hey, I like the concept. I applied an inclusion writer. So I think that was a draw for some people. Cause I worked with some people I'd worked with before, and then whoever was new were referrals from those people. So like, it was kind of this nice community of people who had worked together before. It was all women, BIPOC and queer crew and lead cast. And so I think there was like incentives beyond just like, oh, I want to sell my pilot. I think it was people like, I put it all out there. Like everyone got to read the script. If they like, I didn't like tease anything. I was like, here's what we're working on. Like I was very transparent with my motives, but I was also like, but also this is a short film production by me and my brother, and we want this to be an enjoyable experience. Like this isn't just, it's a bonus if I sell this. Technically the primary goal of a proof of concept, but I think I'm like figuring out like how I'm going to end the sentence. But honestly, I love being on set. So like I sort of took off, once I got to set, I took off the, I want to sell this script like business hat. And I was like, I want to make a really fucking great short. And I didn't even think of it as a proof of concept. So it's like, I think in the before and the after is where I'm really going to like hone in on the proof. It's like, we're in editing phase and we're like, okay, what would Sundance accept basically? Like what would do well and at South by? Because these are all like reach festivals that most of us had not gotten into. But I feel like for everyone, it was like a different reason. No one was, I mean, some people, they were probably like, it's a paycheck, but like we had some people like reach out who wanted to volunteer as a PA. And because I paid my PAs, but like some people were like, hey, like I can't donate, you know, but I want to donate my time. So it was embraced, I think, a lot by like the community in Austin that I knew. And then like the people that I met through not having shot something in many years here in Austin. So like I was like meeting new people because learning new day rates. That was a fun surprise. I was like, now I have my quoted cost. Now I know my actual cost. Yeah, I think it was just like, there's not just one reason that I wanted to do it. I wouldn't say like singularly it's a proof of concept. I think for some people, if that's all they want out of it, maybe that's not the best reason to do it. Like, so I understand your friend saying, I don't think it's worth it for me if that's the only reason they're doing it. I was doing it for several reasons. And one, not just to write myself on screen, but also like striking while the iron is hot, because I got this grant money. I got this like momentum from Sundance. I knew I wanted to shoot it anyway. And I knew one of my goals was to get into the Sundance Film Festival. So like, even if I never sell it as a proof of concept, like if I hit any of those goals, I'll be happy. Because, you know, what are the odds of any of those things happening? So I think you just have to have more reasons than just selling it as a proof of concept. I agree with your friend in that sense, because, and we talk about this. This is the last thing I'll say for this answer, but when people shoot half-hour pilots, I just think that's bad news. Like, I just think it's a waste of resources. It's really hard because no one's going to pick that up. Like, I think in that sense, it's like, just do yourself a favor and shoot a short version of that pilot and call it a proof of concept, because I think like wanting like indie TV is really kind of like a challenging concept. And I think that like, so in that sense, like, yeah, I would say like, that's not worth it.
Yeah. It's not like a feature. If you shoot a feature, and obviously Christina has experience in this, like there are things you can do with a completed feature without having to like change a lot. There's really not distribution for TV shows. And even if somebody picks up your show, they're going to reshoot the pilot so that it matches what comes after. It's not like they're going to put your indie produced pilot at the beginning of a, you know, Netflix series.
I'm like, has there ever been an example of that happening? And this isn't a drag at people who've done that. I'm just like, I've seen like excellent creators do it. And I'm like, it's just really fucking hard to shop that around. So like I think it's just benefits everyone, like financially and like just like energy wise. Like that's a lot to like, I don't know, like features are big things, but it's like, yeah, there's a path. There's distribution for that. Like there's career opportunities, but for a whole shot pilot, like, yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, it sounds like don't let the proof of concept overshadow the concept itself. It's like I feel the same way about people producing full length, like 30-minute or an hour long TV pilots as I do people that spend like $50K on a short film. It's like, what? Why is this the thing that you're doing that on when you know there's nowhere to go from here? Like if you're going to spend that much time and energy and money, produce something that can go somewhere. Produce multiple something so you can spread out, you know, your strategy. Something else I'm curious about, though, from like a producing and directing and maybe even DP and something else that would come up in conversations I would have with people is like, if obviously the goal eventually is to sell a version of this story that you're telling to a higher power, what legally and like on an IP level and even ethically, maybe like what are you promising to people? Because I think the conversation that I had that is I'm bringing this up with, you know, was about like a person who would be helping like produce from the ground up, and naturally that person would probably want a little bit more connection to the story going forward. And if like it got picked up and I went somewhere but then I couldn't promise anything else, that obviously gets complicated, and that's a totally fair concept. So like, did you sign contracts? Like what does that look like for you? Like splitting up the creative control and ownership over the short versus the script?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, and something my brother and I are constantly talking about, because my brother is a director producer, not a writer. So on projects that I've written scripts for, it's always like, okay, where do I come in? Now, he doesn't say it like that, but like we're director producer partners, but I write alone. So, and like we can control like our indie projects, but like if I ever did sell a script, but just as a writer, it'd be a lot harder for me to attach. Like, I don't even know what kind of world that looks like in terms of being able to pick crew as like a nobody, at least. Maybe like it would be easier if I was older. I mean, not older. I was more established and like in a different position in the industry. But so that's been a challenge. I have thought, and obviously this is like thinking down the road, if something ever came of this, if we ever were even able to shoot a pilot, I do really want it to be in Austin. Like it's set in Austin. I don't know what types of control I would have over crew, but like the people I work with are like fantastic. And some have worked on professional sets, SAG, IATSE sets. But I'm just so impressed by the talent here. And it would be really cool to be able to bring people along, but I don't have a guarantee because it's like I don't get to make that decision. So we didn't sign anything that said that anyone would stay attached. Like I think the only, not obligation, but the one that I would fight the most for is like my brother, because we're a director producer team and we want to create more work together. We want to get paid to create work. That would be a whole new thing, and not just go into credit card debt like leading up to each of our wedding years. So I think like I'm still learning, one, like what does it look like when I pitch something? Where can I put myself in and my brother? Because there was one series we pitched where we were going to be attached together as producers, and maybe nothing came of it. But basically, like we are trying to figure that out in this weird industry where like there are some things I have to pitch solo on, and there are some things like we are pitching together on. And then the other obligation is that because it's a Sundance project, if it got turned into something that made money, I think they get like because I signed like some paperwork, but it's like a very small percentage, which is like a donation to the Institute. So that was the only obligation legally, since it was developed in the Sundance lab. And then the other obligation is just like blood, DNA, my brother, like trying to, make good on like the work we've done together, and us both trying to break in, both like individually and together.
Sure.
That kind of goes back to why I think you should treat your proof of concept as a short, as its own individual thing, both creatively and as like the business strategy for it, because that's what you're asking everyone to be part of, and you don't necessarily owe them anything. Like any short could turn into being expanded or adapted. That's like, you're not making promises to the people that are working on that they're going to get to be part of the bigger thing that comes of it. Yeah. And of course there's like, it's always the director and the lead actors that benefit the most from any kind of film. It's like the producers are often overlooked, and the crew's definitely overlooked. And so that's just like the industry that we're in. Yeah. But that's like how I would approach a proof of concept, because of everything we talked about creatively, but also because of that piece of like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know we're going to make a great short, and this is what I plan to do with it. And if that strategy is appealing to you on its own, then be part of it. And if not, then don't. And obviously
that's a good point. Like, cause I wasn't telling, I think I was initially saying proof of concept short film when I was like crewing up, but like, then it was very much like it's a short film, and I think the only reason I was like framing it as a proof of concept is because it was coming out of the Sundance lab. Like it was like the momentum of the lab, and there was like this attachment, and like so in the pitch deck there, like I go into like how this project came to be. And I think if it was another project like where I was like, I want to make this as a long form piece eventually, but I don't have any like foundation behind the project, I probably would like say like, this is just a short film, and like, who knows what will come of it. But yeah, you're right. It's like, you can't make any promises, especially like we're in Austin. So it's like, we especially don't have that power in the industry to like, just decide like who is on the short list of crew for these studios or production companies. So you can only hope that you get to like bring your friends up with you if stuff comes to you like later on in your career. But it's really hard, I think, for when we're all starting out, or not starting out, but breaking in, going from indie to like professional projects, whatever that means. It's funny. It's like professional projects. It's like, there's probably like more unprofessional behavior on like studio sets than
100%
the sets we run in the indie world.
Yeah, my brother's a PA on a lot, and now more so an AD on a lot of professional sets on TV and movies. And the stories he tells, I'm like, that would never fly on my set. Where did these people come from?
I feel like it's like what we're when we always talk about like like we have such imposter syndrome, yet we like have such a high bar for how we like treat people and talk to people and the relationships we foster in this industry. And then you like hear these like Entourage level horror stories, and you're like, I mean, I think this is just like our attempt to like change the standard, because it's like sort of like wait till the old people die off, like in Congress. But because it's like, I don't want to work on those sets either. Like I'll keep working on my indie sets if I go to like a professional set and find out like that's how like my favorite. It's like never meet your heroes, never go on the set of your favorite project and find out that like they're like sexist or something, like, you know, to the PAs or whatever, you know.
Exactly. Well, I want to be conscious of time because we've been recording for a while, but I definitely obviously want to talk about the strategy piece. And I know that for you, part of your sort of like distribution and beyond strategy is impact driven. So can you tell us a little bit about like, once this project's out of post, what are you doing with it, both as a short on its own and theoretically, do you have ideas for how to utilize it on the pitching angle?
So we are trying to hit the regular Sundance deadline. And I think by the time this podcast goes out, I have hopefully been a month past that deadline. So that's August 19th or 18th,
end of September is when this episode comes out.
Yes. And then, so we're like, basically like, that's our first deadline. And then we'll see where there's a few other, obviously there's a bunch of other festivals we're targeting, some Reach festivals, some repro right driven focused festivals. And then I'm trying to, so in a normal like distribution path, it would be, we go through the festival circuit that takes an entire year. And then once we go through all of the festival premieres, then we're able to do public screenings. But I'm like, I don't even know what the world will look like by then. And Roe v. Wade got overturned 24 hours before our prep day. So in our prep day in our first day of shooting was at Planned Parenthood. So we were like with Planned Parenthood employees, like right after that happened. So what I'm hoping to do is, you know, like knock on wood, if it all works out, like Sundance would be our world premiere if it all works out, or some festival will be our world premiere. I'll say that so I don't jinx myself. And then I would make sure, like, I would keep track of whatever, like, basically kind of be like waterfalling it, where I'm gonna see if I can get the approval to do an impact screening at the same time as the festival circuit, because festivals like aren't as accessible to people. Like they're expensive to buy tickets to, and like I could only really attend the ones that, if I can even attend the ones I would get into. So what the impact campaign is that, and I've done like versions of this sort of structure in the past, but not as an impact campaign where like, you know, for my fundraising for my previous shorts, like I would do comedy show fundraisers. So it was like book a lineup. Sometimes if I had like the footage, I would do like a teaser and fundraise for the project. But this time, like my hope is all expenses have been accounted for, and 100% of the ticket sales for this comedy show / screening, public screenings, would go to Lilith Fund, which is an abortion fund here in Texas. We worked out this plan because I talked to our contact at Planned Parenthood 2 days after the leak of Roe v. Wade. So it was like, there's always been these weird like timings of like, you know, how this project has like been worked around. Like we were supposed to talk the day before and then the leak happened. And so we pushed our call. So in that early May call, like she told me one of the flags about my script was that by the time we got to post or distribution, Texas most likely would not be a state you can get an abortion in. And, you know, I was like, oh, she works for Planned Parenthood. She has to like say those things. And I was like, yeah, like my thought was that maybe Roe v. Wade would be overturned by the time we get to the festival circuit. I didn't think it'd be the freaking day before we even shot. So we shot this project in a world where Roe v. Wade was overturned. But we had made this plan like in preparation that we would have a title card at the end, or end card, where we acknowledge that, because we weren't sure when it would happen. So we were going to say like this, even though it's inaccurate that an abortion can happen in Texas, like how we have it in the scene, we wrote this in a world where abortion was legal and accessible. And this is the world we want to live in. Basically, like it'll be more eloquent. And then we would link to resources to get access to abortion for Texans. And then, so like, that was the one piece that we were like, we were prepared for, but I really didn't think I had to put that in until like months down the road. And then the Lilith Fund fundraiser where 100% of proceeds will go to them. So that, and around the strategy of that, it'll kick off probably in Austin. I'd hit up New York and LA because I like have comedy contacts there. And then I am going to try to take it on the road to some red states. So like New Orleans. So yeah, I'm gonna, be careful about like, it's like I'll have to be in probably like bluish cities in red states like Austin. Mm-hmm. But yeah, my goal is just to like take it out. It's not a film about abortion, but I call it the dog pill and the dog food, where it's like friendship is the dog food, female friendship, adult friendships. And then it's like, I'm just slipping in abortion is a non-issue, normalize abortion. Mm-hmm. And so, so that's driven the theme of the Impact campaign. And that's my strategy behind it. And it's my first time that I'll be taking something on a tour like this. Like I've never even gone on tour as a comedian. So here's hoping it works out. Maybe I'll talk to Julie on the road trip strategy.
Totally. And then, so your strategy with taking the short film and then like transitioning back to the proof of concept element is attending festivals. Like what's the strategy there?
So one, definitely, hopefully there's festivals for us to attend, festivals we get into, festivals that are live. And then, so it'd be a combination of like, this 2023 is like film festival circuit and Impact campaign. And the hope is that we're also drawing attention to the project through the film festival circuit, meeting people. Cause like I didn't have that opportunity to meet people at film festivals for projects I made during the pandemic. So my hope is that I'm just like I'm not setting a timeline on when I want my script sold, cause I know that's insane, but I'm just like trying to build up enough ammo in the next year so that when I meet the right person or have the timing works out where like I'm talking to the right production company or studio at the right time, whatever, then I will have like everything kind of figured out. I'll have like hopefully some accolades. I'll have like an impact report where I can actually show like how much we raised for Lilith Fund. Cause like, I think it's beyond just like the film festival laurels. Like for me, it's like, I want to make something that like actually isn't just a comedy. It's like, it's a comedy, you laugh, and then you're like, oh fuck, that makes me think differently about that social issue, is the tagline for the show. But yeah, so like I'm hoping that this pre-work, this preparation will pay off in the long run for like what I can't predict. And at the end of the day, like, fuck it, if I don't sell the script, I'll hopefully have raised a lot of money for Lilith Fund in dedication to my governor, Greg Abbott, who hopefully won't be my governor anymore next year, but I can't predict that either, unfortunately.
So final question. Would you recommend other people do this if they have a long form script that they're really excited about? Would you recommend producing a proof of concept?
Immediate answer is no, because I think it's not because it's like, oh, I did it wrong. No, this is exactly right for me right now. But I don't think you can just say, it's like that question, like, how much would it take to make a short film? Like sure. Someone broadly saying it's not right for everyone. I think like for me, like applying to the Sundance Lab in 2018 was not right for me. Like I had to wait until I was ready with a script I was ready to apply with and in a better like headspace as a creator. I still like back then I still was like figuring out my voice. I'm still figuring it out today. So I think like the immediate answer is like, no, it's not for everyone. I think it's just like anything in the industry. It's got to be the right project, the right timing, the right sort of like elements in place. Like I had the support of Sundance and I knew I had some line of financing and I knew I had a vision for like my next project. And I knew I wanted to shoot something with my brother this year. Like there was like a lot of things that weren't just, as I mentioned, the goal wasn't just to sell the script. I had like 10 goals for this project. So then it's like a bonus if we hit on a couple of them. And so that's why it's like, I don't want to tell people to put all their eggs in one basket. Cause like, I'm doing this and then I'm thinking about like, if this doesn't pan out, like I want to be that person to be like, refuses a no from people, makes it so hard for people to say no, but I have to be realistic and I have to work on other stuff in the meantime. So that like, if they ask me, oh, this isn't right for me, this isn't right for us, but what else do you have, that I actually have other stuff in case, because like I want to be employed in this industry. So I think, yeah, you have to be strategic about it. And if it makes sense based on all those things we talked about, yes, do it, but don't just do it to do it. I think that's why a lot of people make shorts, just to be like, I want to go to the film festivals and rub elbows. And it's like, it's fucking expensive and tiring if you do it the right way. And it's too much for you to just do it, just to do it. Like, I think that's, you know, I don't know. Like, if you can get away with that, I know a lot of trust fund kids have like more credit to, you know, whatever, power to you, whatever, like you have all the power already. But I genuinely think like you really need to be strategic about like proof of concepts, because it's a big investment and of time and energy. And yeah.
And it's not right for everyone.
It's not right for everyone. Insert an analogy for something else. Clothes on dogs, not right for everyone. You know, like some look great in it, some look terrible.
Yeah, and if anyone wants the budgeting spreadsheet that Meghan called out earlier in this episode, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/breakingoutpod, where it and many other templates for pre-production, for proof of concepts and beyond are available. Well, and with that, thank you so much for being here, Meghan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having this podcast exist. I like, you cover on so many topics where I'm like, yes, talk about that thing, because like it's fucking hard, and I like that y'all don't sugarcoat it and you're just honest. And yeah, because there's enough people giving you bullshit advice about breaking in. That's like, why didn't you get viral on McSweeney's? And I'm like, yeah, because that's within my control. Well,
we're delighted that you're now one of our within our community of friends of the pod. Yeah, you're one of our no bullshitters. Welcome to the Friends of the Pod.
Booby heads, if you're in Austin, let's meet up.
Thanks so much to Kelsey Rauber for our theme music, Kaylee Brown for our podcast art, Ezra Lee for editing this episode, and to all of you for listening. Links to learn more about them and our guest are in our episode description.
And thank you to our Booby VIPs, who are our $10 supporters on Patreon. That's Kim Garland, Amanda Blunt, Anthony Epp, Kelsey Rauber, Norman Steinberg, and Brandy Nicole Payne. If you want your name on that list and or you want to have access to all of our bonus resources related to each and every podcast episode we post for free, you can subscribe for as little as $3 to our Patreon at patreon.com/breakingoutpod.
Or join our free newsletter where we share a new creative prompt each month. Next episode, we'll be discussing our favorite tropes in TV and movies. Be sure to tune in.